put yourself in a position where you can't retreat, where it's do or die, sink or swim. Here's what you'll find out. You'll develop incredible swimming skills. You'll find yourself stroking unlike you've ever seen before. Through the inspiration of desperation, you'll become more creative than ever before. Throw your whole self into it. All you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough. But make sure you do all you can do.
Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, presented by 608B Capital. And today joining me, I have Eric Fischer. Eric Fischer, he is from Cincinnati, Ohio, and he has had a lifetime so far in his life of very unique experiences that have led him to where he's at today, which is basically launching a career in speaking, inspirational, motivational, life coach, stuff like that. But his career has been far more than that. He is from Cincinnati, Ohio, was a very high level athlete in that area. And right out of high school, he was drafted by the Chicago White Sox. And he played in both the Chicago organization and the Minnesota Twins organization over a period of 8 years. And through those 8 years, he was progressing as most, he was a left-handed pitcher, tall, lanky, left-handed pitcher, which is anybody that knows baseball knows that that's a very good spot to be in if you're a good pitcher, lefty. And he was grinding away through that career, but like many athletes that are pursuing a dream, he was derailed. That career was derailed by injuries. He had 4 surgeries on his pitching arm throughout the course of that. And eventually that just led to him not being able to continue on in that career. So from there, he started a coaching and training program. And it was basically a facility where he coached other athletes who were pursuing their dreams. But alongside of that, he was pursuing a career in the film industry. And that led him out to Hollywood, and where he went on to produce multiple films, and he's still heavily involved to this day in the film industry. So he's been a part of a lot. He's worn a lot of hot hats in that industry, both from production standpoint to also the finance side of it. He'll touch on a little bit of both of those in the episode. But part of his journey, and part of the journey that was so very impactful when we get into it, and you'll hear later, he also went on to have about in his mid to late 30s. He's 44 now, but he experienced some addiction issues, primarily with alcohol, and that derailed his life for a couple years, until he had to really take some action, get into some treatment programs, and through all of that, really opened his eyes to just different perspectives on life. And he dug deep into psychology, and all things mindset from that point on, so much so that he has become an expert in all the things psychology. So with that, to kind of leverage that bad experience into a positive, he has now leaned heavily into speaking, motivational speaking, and sharing his story and using that to motivate others to get through either hard times themselves or just to get through life more positively and more, bringing more value to their lives than they otherwise may have, had so far. So I'm excited to sit down with Eric and share his story with you guys. I encourage all of you, after you listen to the episode, we're going to drop all of his information and show notes in the show notes. And I encourage you to reach out to him and for further conversation and follow along in his journey. But with that, we're going to turn it over to Eric and get going here. And I appreciate you joining us on Burning the Ships. And here we go. Welcome to Burning the Ships. Mr. Eric Fischer is joining us today. And Eric, I'm excited to dive in to this conversation, my man. was fortunate enough. We connected through, I think, social media, and we exchanged some emails. And as I like to do with most of my guests, this is really my first day meeting you, right? So I've researched you. I know your story and a lot of your background, but what we're going to do is dive into all that. And we're just going to have a nice free flowing conversation. But I know just in my research that you've got a lot of value to share, a lot of mindset nuggets and things like that. And you've been through quite a ride in your journey through life so far. So I can't wait to get all into that, Eric. And with that, I'll turn it over to you and kind of let you introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm excited to join you on the show. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, my name is Eric Fischer. I played 8 years of professional baseball with the White Sox and Twins. I was a high school draft pick out of Cincinnati, Ohio, Moeller High School. A lot of folks know Moeller, produces a lot of high-level athletes. And post-baseball, I had 4 surgeries, cut my career short. And then I had this moment in my life, 27 years old. I was like, I don't have a college education. I'd signed at the University of Tennessee, but I forewent into pro ball. And so I remember when the Twins called to tell me they were not renewing my contract, I thought to myself, what am I going to do? And that answer for me was rather easy, because my entire life I had only been interested in becoming a major league athlete and the film industry. And I had no idea what that was going to mean for me, at such a young age. But so what I did is being an entrepreneur, I do feel like I'm the definition of an entrepreneur, and we'll get into that here, describing what I mean by that. But I moved to LA. I rented out my condo and enrolled into Cal State, where I eventually earned degrees in film production and media law and started producing movies. In Cincinnati, I had owned a small business, a baseball training facility, right when they were becoming more popular. I'm 44. I was a 98 high school draft pick. And it was my dad in the front yard, playing catch with me, and my local coaches and all that. And but the training, the professional training, coaching, was just, when I was about 20 years old, was just starting to pop up. And so I jumped into that. That's one thing that I've always had with me, is the passion to give back and the passion to help, primarily male youth athletes become the best they can be mentally and physically. And so I rented that condo out, packed my bags, threw my keyboard in the back of my car, and headed west. And so a lot of baseball. My world has been professional baseball, coaching over the past 23 years, and making movies, between the nuts and bolts from script to screen, movies like Blue Mountain State. Some of your audiences may have heard of that show. It's got quite a cult following. And then on the financing division as well, transactionally financing tax credits and wrapping up film production financing, more on the transactional side. And then my producing per se is on the creative side.
Right.
And then when I was 38 years old, I came into I'm in recovery from alcohol addiction. And that was the turning point where I had to reestablish and redefine for myself who I was, who this Eric Fischer guy is. Like, how did I break at the age that I did? I'd always been a social drinker, going to play some golf, and then afterwards, with the buddies, grilling out and everything else. And then through some lawsuits and personal attacks, I broke in a real way. And that fundamentally changed the direction of my life. And I started that's why we're doing this, to forward face and say, like, look, we all break. Let's humanize this and gain awareness. And so, like they say in rehab, it's like, clean your side of the street and build your side of the bridge. And that's what I'm doing here with starting my own podcast and not just coaching athletes anymore. I went back to school again for, I'd say, like, lifestyle coaching, that person who life is flying by them. They wake up, they go sit in an office, they come home and they handle their kids or their responsibilities in their personal life. And then before you know it, boom, they're 50 years old or 40 or 35, 38 years old. And they're like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Like my heart's beating, my blood's flowing, but I'm not living.
Yeah. You're looking at a great example of that in me. I spent the better part of really my 20s and most of my 30s in that trajectory of just rinse and repeat, Groundhog Day, go to my job, complete my job and all the tasks involved with it, come home. I allowed myself to get out of shape, unhealthy. My mindset was terrible. Now I was always a positive person, but I was just playing the game basically, So fortunately I did have a few wake up moments where it shook me up and got myself together and on a good track ever since. But so what you're speaking about is very important to me. And that really sparked this podcast with the burning the ships, kind of like never looking back. We're leaving it all behind. We're going forward in that mindset. So I think based off of everything you just kind of led in with, you fit the script perfect for this. And so I kind of want to go back. I got a few questions I jotted down as you were going through that. So let's go back athletically. You went to a prestigious high school and sounds like you were recruited heavily, made it to the big show basically. What were you driven at an early age to go after that as a goal, or were you just talented enough where it happened? Like where did that come from? Who pushed you? Where did all those, the foundation, I guess, where was that built?
Yeah, I did have the talent,
Okay.
or I wouldn't have made it, but talent it's not the talent that matters. It's the grit, the motivation, the determination, and people have action and motivation confused. Action comes first and motivation follows, right? We institute within our brain this positive feedback loop, which is dopaminergic, and then we want more of it, right? And that's where this motivation comes from. And I had both at an early age. And I think one thing that comes to my mind is kind of like what Marcus Aurelius says in his book of Meditations. Famously, he says the obstacle is the way. Yep. And because we are going to have things in front of us that challenge us, people, places, things, and all that. And I vividly remember in the second grade, and I don't remember much when I was young, but I had a teacher, Miss Bailey was her name. She told me to write something down different than me wanting to be a Major League Baseball player when they hand out those sheets of paper asking, what do your parents do? What do you want to do when you grow up? And I can still hear that woman's voice in my head. And that was a driver for me, and I think that, so I did have the self, and I loved the game, I just loved, like, that's the one thing that us humans, especially as we age up, it's like, find out what it is that you're curious about and lean in, because you cannot avoid or manufacture what it is that you're curious about. You're just drawn to it. As who you are as a being with a capital B, and everybody's curiosities are different. So I leaned into baseball, and I was lucky enough to have a father who also was a high level athlete, played Division I football, and he's a driver, entrepreneur. And he got me in that front yard. And as a parent, he opened the door for my success. It was my job to walk through it. And then when I was 12 years old, I started playing select baseball, and I was lucky enough to have folks around me like Buddy Bell, who's a former major leaguer, and I played with his sons. A gentleman and mentor named John Warden, who was also in the major leagues. And a number of folks like that helped steer me in the correct, and not only making the correct decisions, but providing opportunity for me to be seen by the scouts and everything else. Because for myself, as a tall, lanky, left-handed pitcher, I was people were interested, being left-handed. And I did, I say this with as much humility as possible, but I am a good athlete. And then what happens at a young age, it's this false sense of identity because I was defined by the game, and when you're coming up and you win a national championship at 12 and you're on these traveling teams, all summer long and into the fall, traveling all over the country. It's easy to get swept up into that, which is ego and pride. And I had all that, no brake pad, If you cry, you're weak. Sleep when you're dead. Very alpha type mentality. But yet what I was denying myself was my creative intuition, because I'm what call it the left-handedness in me is I don't relate well to those people who tell you what to do rather than ask what it is that you like and you enjoy. And there's certain ways, like my dad says, I think in my view, always, this is stuck with me. It's like, you can get anything out of anybody if you ask them the correct way, And so I was around a lot of these people that were like, jump, little Eric Fischer. And I was jumping, but so I was kind of pushed and pulled in a little bit of a ping pong ball, growing up. But yeah, when I was 18, when I was 16, I knew that I was getting drafted because general managers were in my parents' living room.
Right. And it's interesting. So, before we started recording, I mentioned, my kids are involved with our local little league organization and all of that. And I'd love to get your perspective, because like you're one of the 1% that make it through and actually make it, right? But majority of these kids will not. Like we might, if you're looking at a sample size of 100 kids, at 8-10 years old playing local little league, 2 might play college ball. It's very unlikely that any of them will make it as far as you got. And I struggle as a parent with observing the pressure that is put by other parents and just people involved on their children at that age. And you haven't been through it and having to, you were one of the ones that made it through. But could you share because I know you've done some coaching and stuff like that. Could you share your perspective around like coaching young children at that young of an age and applying? I mean, we've got kids locally that a lot of kids, it's kind of become the thing. They're playing year round. They're 8 years old, year round coach pitch baseball. And it is all their life is about. And it's seems to be more of a parent driven thing. So do you have any thoughts and perspectives around that?
Yeah, I do. I've been doing the amateur baseball coaching thing for a long time. And what's interesting about what I've learned is that I've never coached a team. My facilities have been one-on-one or very small group oriented. So I'm objective in my approach. I want what's best for the athlete first, then the family, and then the team, and then the organization as a whole. And I've done quite a bit of speaking on this. And I feel like I agree with you. There's too much too soon. And especially when the kids haven't hit puberty yet. There's in terms of like volume of throwing, and then we all have heard about burnout. Yeah. I'm a big fan of multi-sport athletes. And when a coach says, son, Mike, whatever the kid's name is, what position do you play? It's not, I play shortstop. It's coach anywhere you want me to play. Like how well can you fit into the team in terms of, if we're strictly talking about positioning. But I do think that it's too much too soon. These kids need to have fun.
Yeah.
Because if you have fun, you're in a constant state of learning in that way. If you're having fun and you're enjoying what you do, like one of my coaching programs I have is on 5 pillars, and I'm going to lean into this on the coaching for these athletes. It's curiosity, mastery, autonomy, purpose, and autolicity, which is a fancy Greek word for self-purpose. When you love what it is that you do and there's no trophy or paycheck tied to it, it's not considered work, right? It's like the reframing of the brain. Well, I have to go to practice, or do I get to go to practice, right? It's can be as simple as that. And I think a lot of parents, unfortunately, are pushing their kids for their own self-driven interests. And I see that quite a bit as well. So the more you lay off the kid, they'll start to pick it up to the extent they want to, because no matter what, you can strangle the kid into playing and force them to play, but they'll resent not only the parent, but they'll also resent the coach, and they'll end up burning out and not playing. So, if the athlete has a genuine love for it, then they're gonna find a way to get off that couch. You know, they won't be on Instagram. They'll find a way to go play.
Right.
You know, it's like I saw this Instagram reel from this coach that I thought summed it up well. He said, you know, a lot of kids want to eat, but there's not many kids that are hungry. And I coach the kids that are hungry. So if you notice, I didn't mention anything about talent, what level of talent you have, because talent will perform. Work ethic will perform better than any talent alone.
Yeah. And that's true in all walks of life.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Not just, if you love what you do, you'll find a way to succeed at it.
Right.
And then, you know, the chips fall where they fall.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I agree with you. And you said it early on just then, but the importance of prioritizing fun for especially these young ones, man. My son is 8. All I care about is when he gets off the field, whether it's a practice or a game, did you have fun? Because if he's not having fun and if it's turning into like school, no kid wants to go to school. Well, if he's viewing practice from the same lens as he does school, he's not going to want to keep going back. And then once he gets to that age where he can make his own decisions a little bit more independently, Dad, I don't want to play. It's not fun, you know, right? So I want to prioritize that. And I wish more people did, because I think we lose a lot of potentially good athletes in the sense they could develop into the work ethic and all the good things, but they never get there because they get burned out and it's not fun, right? Because it was never prioritized that way. So, yeah. So, yeah, I could talk all day about this, but I'm going to get into so, you know, you had the talent, sounds like you had the support system with your dad and everybody in and around your ecosystem that kind of set the stage for you to get there and capitalize on it. And then you mentioned you got injured and things kind of came to a halt, right? So your major league career is over. You said you were 27 at that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was 27. I was trucking through the minor leagues and started to have surgeries.
Yeah.
I had 2 elbow surgeries, a shoulder surgery, and then a wrist surgery, all on my throwing arm. You know, and in pro ball, you're either, and in many ways, you know, this filters top down into amateur ball too. You're either an asset or a liability. Yeah. Professional sports and baseball in particular, because of the nature of the draft, high school, college, athletes both filter into the same draft, and then you have free agent signs as well. So the turnover rate, and then you have the international component as well, right? All the Latin American athletes that are coming over. So the turnover rate is rather high.
So when you was it at 27 when like it hit you like, all right, this thing is over, this dream is over, so now I've got to think about the next thing? Or had you been kind of planning and prepping your, you know, for the realization that this might be over soon? Like, have you, or, you know, because you said you moved to LA, right? So had you been kind of putting things in motion for the next steps and phases of your life at that point?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't. It was in the back of my mind throughout my life, because I had been going in pro ball. My spring training was in Tucson, Arizona. So we would puddle over to LA as a, you know, little flight every once in a while. And I would, you know, became familiar with LA, but it was that phone call from the GM. It was like, or I'm sorry, from my agent. And I was sitting on the trunk of my car thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do? You know, what am I going to do? And then I'd say about 6 months thereafter, I was walking in downtown Cincinnati, and this woman, Amy Warner, who's an actress in the local theater there, she came from New York on Broadway, and she came up to me and said, like, you know, I was much younger then, of course, you know, like, you got a good look. Have you ever thought about being on camera? And I said, well, I've done some commercials as a young kid. And that conversation right there re-energized me into, well, you know, my college is paid for by Major League Baseball, because when you get drafted out of high school, you get your signing bonus, but almost all athletes will have their college paid for as well.
Okay. And
I thought, you know, I'm going out west, man. You know, like, I've always felt like West Coast would be home for me in a way. And I did it, you know, and that's that entrepreneurial thing too. It's like, you know, you're always going to have the doubters and the naysayers. And I have yet to be around, I've been around some notable folks throughout these years, especially in the film industry. And I have yet to come across anybody who's done anything great who also has not overcome significant hurdles and obstacles in order to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish. You know, you set your aim on something long and far and an upwards aim, and nobody is going to stop that person from accomplishing what it is that they want to accomplish.
Yeah. So I've seen, you know, we've done over 100 interviews on this podcast, and I've talked to some, including yourselves, just some high level performers in all walks of life. And there's a couple months ago, I sat down and I made a list of like common denominators that I consistently see. And you're hitting on one big one, is not just their ability to get through adversity, right? And that resilience and stuff like that. But almost there's this sense that most high performers welcome it. Like they know it's coming. They know it's coming. They crave it. But even taking it a step further, sometimes they create adversity because they got to have a puzzle to solve, right? They got to have something to figure out. Would you agree on that? And if so, like, can you expand on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we need something to run from, and we need something to run to.
Yep, that's it.
And sometimes we create that, even fictitiously in our head. You know, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, these guys are famous for this. I mean, Jordan, if somebody just looked at him wrong, that game was for that person.
Yep.
You know, and it's about awareness. Some people have it naturally. I'd argue against that. Over time, you experience enough to have people say, you know, you can't do that. That's so unrealistic. But you need to be unrealistic. If you want to really achieve something great, whether you're in the corporate world as a CEO or working towards a promotion, whatever it is for the individual, you know, we're highlighting some entertainment and some sports here, but it's the same for anybody who wants to achieve something great. The more you work towards that goal, the more you're going to have the obstacles in front of you. And oftentimes, as we know, that those are people, and you can distill that down even further. They're the people who know you best because they know how to pick at you. You know, they know how to just sting you right in the rib with the right word. And sometimes that means you need to distance yourself from family and go away for a while too. You know, I mean, that's an unfortunate truth at times. But, you know, and then when you go away, here's the other thing I've learned over time as well, especially through this whole addiction piece, is like you go away for a while and you just do you, whether it's healing from some sort of trauma or whether it's you just focusing in the dark on your entrepreneurial endeavors in which you are currently seeking. You go away for a while, you will naturally get rid of the people in your life because they won't be in touch with you at all. And only the people that really love you will stay with you when you go dark for a while. And I think it's important for every entrepreneur to only tell the people and seek advice from people who are already within the field of which you are trying to enter. You know, because people, whether it is on social media, those type of comments, or whether it's in person, people spread bad news about somebody else from the bottom up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, it's not a top down. I mean, if I'm seeking to become, you know, a keynote speaker that's nationally known, let's say, and I only get advice from somebody who is currently a keynote nationally recognized speaker, they're not going to be talking down to me. They're going to help me. You know, and that now we're talking about like you are who you surround yourself with. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the average of the 5 people you're around the most, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. And you know, we all have, like, I still have some childhood friends, right, that I love dearly, right? But we're just in different parts of our lives, right? And if we met up at a restaurant, I'd catch right up with them and I'd be friends. But where I have to focus my attention, and it goes to the point of what you're saying now, it has to be on the areas in which I want to achieve, right? And the people that are doing those things, because, and you're also, to that point, you mentioned it earlier in a different way, but like we always have to have a hand up, right? Reaching up to a mentor, or somebody that's doing things we want to, but also a hand down to try to lift people that are maybe hoping to be where we're at, right? So there's this balance you got to have with all of that. I think that's very important.
But that's still the top down. That's still top down.
Absolutely.
That's because if you're seeking mentorship from somebody who's, let's say, 3 steps above you, and then you turn around and help somebody 3 steps below you, that's still top down.
Amen. Yep. 100% agree. And I think, when it goes back to like welcoming adversity, and this is a topic because you have kids, right? You have
2 daughters. 2 daughters.
2 daughters. What are their ages?
12 and 9.
Okay. So let's, I was going to go to this a little bit later in the conversation, but I'm going to segue to it right now because it kind of goes in line with what, about facing adversity and building resilience through doing hard things. You mentioned Marcus Aurelius earlier, Obstacle is the Way. Ryan Holiday wrote a good book entitled Obstacle is the Way that really dives into this. I think about it often with my children. So a lot of the good things in my life have come through building calluses through adversity, right? Just getting through difficult things. And you're going to speak to something you went through with like alcohol and all that. We'll get to that in a minute. But you've built resiliency through natural adversity. Well, now you've got young kids, just like I do. I have a 13 and an 8-year-old. They're not facing much adversity in their lives right now, right? They have parents that love them. They have financially, they're stable. They have everything provided for them. There's not too much natural adversity they're facing. So my question, I ask a lot of entrepreneurs this, how do you approach like almost curating adversity for your children so that they can build that resilience and stuff as they, get later in life?
Yeah, sure. I may shift that just a little bit.
Sure, absolutely.
If I may. I think because all things are relative, right? So my 12-year-old doesn't have the responsibility or adversity coming her way in the form of a mortgage or the form of making sure she keeps gas in her car because she's not there right now, right? But in her 6th grade school, she has adversity because her peers, she's not going to like every one of them. You have this and I certainly want to stay away from politics, but you have this false sense of being nice, right? I don't aim for being nice. I aim for being good. Yeah. And there's a root level difference between those two. So I think that the adversity is the pressures of school, the pressures of their peers, the pressures of, because now at her age, she's getting into this whole, I've got a crush on so-and-so boy, all that's happening right now. Right. So a couple of things I say to my daughters is don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Don't be cautious. Be aware. Think about what you're thinking about. Like, is this like right here in Minneapolis, we're starting to get some weather and it's like, still walk on that sidewalk. Don't not walk on that sidewalk, but don't run on it. Ask yourself, if I run on it, what may happen? Ask yourself rhetorical questions. And then I think also it's about the intentional. So like a lot of folks will call it like prosilience. So resilience is more about how you respond to certain obstacles and challenges and trauma for that matter. And then prosilience is the intentionality behind it, which is awareness. So gaining awareness about actually being able to articulate and define for yourself why I'm resilient. And the only way to do that is to be able to have somebody in your corner that you trust to speak to, whether that be a parent or somebody else, a third party, and then journaling, in my view. I think old school reading and writing, taking 5 minutes out of your day to write a couple of your thoughts down, and all these fancy keywords are floating around social media now and everything else, like the gratitude journal and everything else. Just write some stuff down, right. Just because that's intentional thinking, and then some people will say as well, our thoughts are our prayers. Jordan Peterson says this, and I believe that to be true. Our thoughts are our prayers, and we can instill a lot of resilience within our brain if we think about what we think about, rather than just walking around this earth completely oblivious with a fixed mindset. So I do think kids have adversity come their way. It's just in a different form than adults, and I think also this is where parents, in my view, go wrong. They say, look, you can only have one cookie after dinner. But if you teach the kid to understand the value of a healthy meal, why it's important, and to allow them to judge what they really mean. And us adults need this same sort of work.
No doubt.
Inner work, shadow work, whatever people want to call it. It's like, did you eat a good meal? Yes. Are you legitimately full? Yes. Well, then if you ask, we instill this in our children. If you ask for dessert, you'll get into trouble. Otherwise, get up and get your own dessert. And what do? They get up and they indulge on the sugar, and then they feel sick, and then they learn. So now my kids are like little adults at 9 and 12 years old. They get up and they'll go get a whole cookie, but they may only take a couple bites of it because they're learning self-regulation on their own. And then there's autonomy, right? And then there's confidence, because people think confidence can be read from a book, and that's wrong. I study a lot of psychology, and there's plenty of data that supports this, where confidence comes from experience. Confidence doesn't come from somebody patting you on the back and saying, good job. Confidence comes from experience, and that's autonomy, the individual doing it for themselves first, the where, why, how, and when, whatever it is that they're engaging in. And then you learn, and you learn through your failure.
Yep, that's it.
And you learn through failing, not doing it. And that's order and chaos. That's the definition of learning. Every day, chaos is the unknown, order is the familiar. Every day, it's our responsibility as humans. It's our responsibility to dip our toe into chaos responsibly, causing no harm every day. Because what happens is we grow incrementally to the steps we take into chaos, and I'm a firm believer in pushing your kids into opportunity and then allowing them to fail at first, fail often, fail hard. As a parent, I take the view of it's my job to just keep them in the corral of a forward and upward aim, Jacob ladder metaphor, one step at a time. And then when they fall, it doesn't mean you're hurt.
Right.
Yeah. And then I'm always there. A parent is clearly always there to make sure that they get the Band-Aid on them when they need it. But, it's A-okay for the kid to wipe off their own blood sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no better, in my opinion, with kids, if they're, they've got to have interest in it, number one, but just athletics, sports is a great training ground for adversity, right? I believe that. Like our son, baseball, he loves baseball, but we put him into wrestling last year, and this is his second season in wrestling. And half the time he does really good. He's excited, but half the time, and we want it this way, he's getting his butt kicked, right? I mean, his nose is bleeding. He is facing adversity, and he's crying, and he's, why am I doing this? I hate this. But he calms down. He goes to practice the next week, practices a couple nights, and he's got his tournament the next weekend, and he tries it again. And that's to your point. It's like, I want my kids, I want them, and it's hard as a parent because you want your kids to succeed, right? I want to celebrate with him winning a trophy or the number one medal or whatever it is. But if I'm being honest with myself, it's more important for him and his development to fail just as much or more right now. And he's got to experience that. So I couldn't agree with everything you said, more there. I want to segue now into your struggles with addiction to alcohol, how that developed. And you can take this wherever you want, but how it developed, kind of where you landed with it. What was the light bulb moment? Like, this is spiraling out or has spiraled out of control. And then your steps from there to evolving to where you are now, if you can walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep this short enough to maybe prompt some additional conversation here, right? So drinking became an issue for me around 38 years old. And I was, at this point in time, I was 10 years in LA producing movies. My career was moving quick in the right direction. And it had been for some time at that point. And I was married, had 2 little kids, 2 little girls, you know, the one was just born. And I also, a little bit of context, I was the guy who, if you would have said, Eric, you need to go see a psychologist, I would have said, I'm not seeing that shrink. Mm-hmm. That would have come out of my mouth. I was completely naive to the whole mental health and mental disease and mental illness component that I'm now very, very, very familiar with. And some extended family members have borderline personality disorder, and I had no idea what that entailed. And so looking back, it was a slow, progressive demise for me. And after 10 years of marriage, it hit a head when we were moving from Los Angeles back to Cincinnati to start splitting time between LA, Cincinnati, my hometown, and New York. We had offices in both, and I had been recruited over to this very large film financing division of a company to head up all of their production. And so 3 things unfolded at the same time: the birth of my new child, my second daughter, the increasingly dangerous threats from extended family members. So it was that personal touch. I was in an ongoing lawsuit from a Paul Walker movie that when he passed away, a lawsuit ensued. So I was tangled up in a lawsuit, and then upon the move, I broke my back. Well, I herniated a disc in my back severely, which ultimately led to surgery. So when you combine those elements together, none independently broke me. It was collectively that pressure, and then the personal touch of malevolence with that family member attacks. And I started, and then to drown out the pain of my back being injured, I would have that extra cocktail at night, you know, and that's danger sign number 1 that I was not aware of, you know. And then one thing led to another. 1.5 years, 2 years go by, and I'm waking up at 6 a.m. having a drink, you know. And when it gets a hold of you, people don't understand this until it's too late in a way. But if you're the guy whoever's watching this or listening to this, if you're the guy out socially and before you go home, you put another drink down, you're on the clock. And the other thing I've learned as well, and I do share this trait, is people with addiction. Now we're talking about alcohol because it's my story, but as we know, I mean, addiction can be sex, it can be gambling, it can be social media, it can be all the drugs, etc. I mean, if you have impulsive natures to your personality traits, where if I'm like, Jay, let's go jump out of a plane, you say, yeah, that's a great idea. It might be a great idea until you're about a 1/4 inch from hitting the ground, right? You know? So it's like, think about what you're thinking about. This folds back into our earlier conversation. And I was not aware of myself. I was not aware of my actions, my choices. Nobody forced me to start drinking, you know, because in recovery, they say, you know, the addict has to take full and sole responsibility for their addiction. And I believe that to be true. However, I'd also be naive to say there were no other contributing factors, you know, because I had to understand and learn that I was running from something that I couldn't see, I couldn't taste, I couldn't hear it, but it was right on my shoulder the whole time. And it wasn't until I went down to Florida to go to inpatient rehab, I started to gain awareness, surrounded by fellow brokenness. And then I went to inpatient rehab for about 4 months, 3 times a week, 3 or 4 hours per session. And throughout that process, not only did I come to understand the consequences of my actions and what my motivations were that put me in the position that I was in, because there's collateral damage when somebody is going through addiction. Anybody who loves them suffers greatly suffers because of the addict. And what are they going to do? They're put in a very tough position. And I wasn't an addict. I didn't cross-contaminate drugs. I wasn't a cocaine guy. I wasn't anything like that. It just, time had caught up to me, and I had to turn around and face what it is that needed to face. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, says this, it's like you'll find what you need most where you least want to look.
Yeah.
And until you turn and face the tyranny that's upon you, it will catch up to you, and it's like, if you don't make the decision, it will be made for you too. That's another good piece too that I've learned. That's Jordan Peterson. And it's like, you learn all these little nuggets from these people just filled with wisdom. And in my view, they're really like more philosophers than they are a psychologist or a neuroscientist or anything like that. And if you take it serious, you can heal, and you can mend the relationships that are worth saving and salvaging, but that, I don't wish addiction on anybody. And that's, coming out the other side, like a fundamentally different person. I want to help as many people. That's why we're doing this podcast, forward facing, and help spread the word that, like, you can be better than you are. You can be more than you currently are. We need more people saying this to especially young men. And you will form, if you are authentic to your true self, that's the only way you can fly. And you will form your own tribe. You will have the people around you that will not only be there for you when things are going well, but more importantly, they'll celebrate when you do things well without turning the message upon themselves. And they won't leave you when you do go through hard times, because we're all going to go through hard times. We're all going to have death. We're all going to get fired from a job that we probably hate anyways,
Yep.
And we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do? One thing that I ask myself, as dark as this is like, how am I going to be at my father's funeral when everybody around me is broken? Who are they going to lean on? Who's not going to fall? And once I came to grips with my mortality in that way, gone into the abyss, now I feel like I can actually appreciate every single day, see the skies for truly blue, and be grateful for every day that I get to wake up.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. And your daughters, well, I would imagine your oldest one kind of lived with you through this, like the dark days, right? I mean, she probably has some memories of it, I would think.
Yeah, she does. And I think it's important, because our family was split as I was going through what I was going through, because their mother, who I love dearly, we're not together anymore, but our relationship is really strong. We co-parent really well together, and she's a beautiful person. She's a fellow filmmaker as well. But she did the right thing, in large in part, and separated me from them for a while. And then that reintegration process took place, and I'm proportionate to their age. I think it's extremely important to be open with your children, to understand when we need to be dad and when we need to be a father. A father is going to teach you life. A father is going to teach you to be a good person. And the adventure of life is a definition of life. And you can only have adventure in your life if you are in tune with your responsibility in life. And so I tell them candidly what I went through, what happened to me, why I broke the way that I did, so they can make better choices as they grow up. And then we form a bond with one another. The parent forms a bond with their child, where it's not just one cookie, kid. You know, so because we all need somebody to speak to. You know, that's why we write. That's why we speak. We're creatures of nature and of the universe, and we need connectivity. We need community. And so with these kids growing up, especially with social media, if they don't have any outlet, somebody to talk to, what are they going to do? So I, as a father, I want them to be able to, and they get to choose on their own. They're going to go to mom for some stuff and dad for other things, and maybe a teacher for or coach for other things as well. And I love all, and I love all of it. Yep. It all is positive. It's all good outlets. But you know, when she gets her heart broken at 16 years old by some boy, like, who's she going to talk to? Well, I want to increase the chances that she can come to me and say, Dad, look, I've got a problem, you know? And so I'm servicing them through the addiction that I went through, so they understand it more so. So as they continue to grow, they can make good choices for themselves.
Yeah, that's so I've been on the other end of that, your children's end of that spectrum. My father, who was my superhero until about 10 years old, he fell into him and my mom were married. In my eyes, as a 10-year-old, I had the perfect family, right? My dad's a superhero, amazing. My mom was awesome too, still is. But my dad fell into addiction. And at 10, this probably was going on for years prior, but he got into some hard drugs, and that led to a divorce, then him in and out of rehab, jail, things like that, for literally the rest of his life. So he just died 4 years ago. So he wasn't able to come out. He did periodically, like he would get clean, everybody get excited, and then, you know, he'd fall back off. And that happened so many times that you just knew that was the cycle. But my point in saying that is, as the child of that, right, I didn't get to see the happy ending. I didn't get to see him come out of it and do great things. But even though I didn't, I am so thankful for the way even that all played out, because it calibrated a lot of things for me as a man, as a dad, as a husband, to show me I am not going to do that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm above falling into that. Like I have to check myself frequently on, because I'm very impulsive. I'm very, you know, when it comes to alcohol, I drink socially. Like you said earlier, you know, that's how you always drank. But occasionally I have found myself, man, it's been 3-4 nights in a row. I've made 2, 3, 4 bourbon drinks. What am I doing here? I got to stop, take a break, you know? So, but I'm able to do that because I've seen what it can wreck. You know, I've been a product of that. Right. But I'm thankful for all of it. So I think, you know, your story is and continuing to end a lot better than my father's, but your kids seeing you work through that and face it for, like you said, you're facing it, like you're moving forward, and now you're trying to help folks. That's powerful. And, you know, I think from a modeling standpoint for your children, unbelievable, and kudos to you. So,
yeah. Thank you. You know, I've learned that, there's congruence with it. I mean, Carl Rogers, kind of dubbed this term as like identifying your true self and aligning your actions up next side of it, and marching one step at a time, one day at a time. And, you know, these are recovery type terms, like one day at a time, but that's true for anything we do in our life. You know, I mean, when we set a vision for ourselves that's upward and far reaching, we can all say, yes, I want to, you know, achieve this goal up here. But the first step is we have to ask ourselves, like, you have to aim low. What's the lowest aim? And somebody may say to themselves, like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. But it makes sense, because if you're not humble enough to take the very tiny little first step, That's your ego and your pride working on you. And
Yep.
you will never reach that end state goal without taking the first step of humility. And I had to learn that the hard way, because on the surface, I was a pretty successful person at 44 years old, but on the inside of me, I was just a tornado. I was a tornado. And when you don't understand your purpose and your values to the extent where you can be pop quizzed on them from anywhere, anyhow, from anybody, you don't know. But until you can articulate those with clarity, then you're blind. You're walking around as an alive, dead person. And most of us, I was in this category. I think most of us are. And if we just
I told you I was too,
Yeah. And they don't teach us this in school.
Right.
They don't teach any of this in school. But now the traditional public school, I do think that some of these school systems are catching on a little bit, but
I was going to say, as far as it, you alluded to this, but I think majority of people, and I struggle with it too. It sounds like, all of us do, where we struggle with that patience and the outcome, right? And the overall outcome is a long ways away. And it's that we're not getting that instant gratification. So like, let's say the outcome is I want to lose 50 pounds. Well, if I go to the gym today, nothing happens. Nothing. Yeah. I can't feel it. I can't see it. I just went to the gym today. If I go tomorrow, nothing happens. Right. And most people get to day 2 or day 3 relative to whatever whether it's weight loss or kicking an addiction or whatever it is. And they stop because they're not getting that gratification, and they're so impatient in the outcome. Right. So I heard one, a guest on the podcast said, you got to be patient in the outcome, but ruthlessly impatient in the actions, like in the pursuit of the outcome. Right. And I think that's where people get lost sometimes. And I kind of want to use that to segue into my last question to you. Because you're building out, you obviously are building your influence within all the things you're doing. And part of that is a coaching and speaking platform, right? You have experience out the wazoo to lean on to express these things. And you've studied it. You've studied psychology and things like that. So my question is, and you said this earlier, and you're exactly right, particularly when it comes to men, most 90% of men or more do not want to admit that they might need some help, that they might need a third party to come in. And even if it's not a psychologist, just a coach, a mental coach, somebody to just start the engine, get things moving, hold them accountable, things like that. Most will throw up such a big wall of rejection to that they'll never get to experience what it could have been if they had leaned into it. So speak to most of those people at home that are listening, and they are in the shoes where you might have been, where I was, where most people are, and they just can't get started because they won't get out of their own way. Do you have some thoughts on that?
I do. Yeah. And I do agree. It's mainly with men right now. I mean, but again, that's such a blanket statement.
Absolutely.
So take that with a grain of salt. I think that it's people fundamentally change for 2 primary reasons. One of which is the pain of our current situation is worse than the pain that it's going to take to overcome and heal, which is rooted in action and awareness. And the other way and reason people change is we establish for ourselves that vision, something so far-fetched and forward-looking that it feels and is in many ways so unrealistic that the person is all but consumed by it in a real way. You tie your shoes, you think about it. You eat, you think about it. You sleep and you dream about it. If you're younger and you're in school, you can't focus on your subject because you're thinking about it. If you're in the corporate world and you are sitting at your cubicle, it's hard for you to focus on next week's presentation or hitting your sales quota because you're thinking about this one thing, right? So people change for those two fundamental reasons. And what I try to do is bridge the gap in between there, is to prompt a lifestyle change. Because back to your point on the whole weight loss thing, right? That's why these diets oftentimes don't work, because we're fixated on the goal itself. I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, and with that as well is there's a confusion with the self, because cognitive dissonance, because if I want to lose 10 pounds, but I'm a smoker, I'm gonna justify and shrink down the risks associated with smoking, and because I want to lose 10 pounds. Or so those are finite, those are Band-Aid fixes, right? But if I start with my diet and my nutrition, smoking may be a bad example, but let's stay with diet and nutrition, right? If I focus on the nutrition aspect and my sleep and removing sugar, little bits at a time, because otherwise we won't do it. Yep. It'll feel way too overwhelming. And then that's when we get that burn in the chest that just won't go away. Anxiety happens when we don't know what to do, when we have too many options, or we're looking into the future, or we're looking into the past. We're dwelling on something that happened yesterday. The past is dead. And that's more of this Stoicism philosophy too, right? Every day we die and it's gone. Our memory serves us. Our memory is not to provide anything to us other than how to change for the good. So that's what memory is for us, is served at. That's its purpose, is to inform us on the decision we made based on a certain variable, which is unchangeable at this point, and then how to change it forward looking, right? So I bridge the gap for these primarily men who want to change and transform their life in the dark, in a lifestyle. It's not a hobby, because hobbies go away. Habits are hard to form. Habits are also very easy to go away as well. If you miss your habit, a lot of these folks in the psychology world will say, like if you get into habit, like routines and habits are different as well. But if you don't perform your habit for more than 2 days, you've acquired a new habit. Mm-hmm. Sort of approach. But, I take the approach of, yes, I'm speaking. Yes, I'm forward facing. Yes, I'm coaching men, largely middle-aged, who need life change. Something in their life isn't working. And we put the puzzle together for them and work together to improve their life intrinsically, to where they feel like they have control sustainably moving forward for the rest of their life. It's not about losing the 10 pounds, because we all know that you don't gain just the 10 pounds back. You gain like 15 or 20, right. It's so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of us out there, and I think that the whole vulnerability thing too, men don't want to be vulnerable. And I think that also is just who we are throughout millennia. Yep. And we're the ones who go out and hunt and bring the food back, and the female is the caretaker, and that's rooted in our biology. Men are more interested in things. Females are more interested in people. I happen to be more interested in people. So I think that and then, Brene Brown says, who mainly is a leader in the female space, but she says that too many of us people walking around this earth think we are courageous, but yet we lack the ability to be vulnerable. And you can't have one without the other. You cannot be courageous without being vulnerable first.
Yeah.
And so I bridge that gap to the best of my ability, succinct within my experiences, year to date. So yeah, that's the mission. That's the mission, Jay.
I love it, man. And The good news is, I think, our culture as a whole is shifting when it comes to that. Cause I mean,
Yes, it is.
especially like I'm in a bunch of networking groups kind of around my business, but I intentionally joined one this past year. It's kind of like, it's a dad's group, like a dad's business group. It's called the Dad Edge with Larry Hagner. And it's all about like higher level entrepreneurs getting super vulnerable about what's going on at home. And we get on Zoom calls and we just let it out. And like for me, 3 years ago, I would have laughed my buddies out of the room if they told me they were doing that. Right. Like it wasn't even on my brain and now I'm doing it. I'm improving. I feel, I don't know, a lot of that stuff, just getting it out. And you mentioned it earlier, journaling. That's something I've never done until recently. Just getting those thoughts out and sharing it with other individuals. And you realize you're not the only one dealing with a lot of these issues that, you think you might be alone. You're not. Majority of people are dealing with the same type of crap,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. We all are. We
Right.
all are.
Yeah.
It's bringing it to the surface for yourself voluntarily. Right. All this stuff has to be, we can't be a brain divided. And that's where we get confused. How I envision myself doesn't align with my actions.
Yeah.
So if we're true to ourselves, and this again goes back to journaling, you have to be able to write just start with one sentence about, who am I? One thing I know we're coming to an end.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine, man.
One thing that changed my life from Jordan Peterson. And you have to ask yourself this question, and you have to take it serious. If you want to change your life, you ask yourself this question. It's got to be a real question for yourself. You sit on the edge of your bed. Sit on the edge of your bed one night, and you ask yourself, what is one thing that I'm doing wrong that's destroying my life? What's one thing that I know I'm doing wrong that I would fix, that I could fix? And that'll get an answer. You'll get an answer, but it won't be the one that you want. But you will get an answer. And you don't need to answer it right away either. Because what that question does is it prompts the brain. Because what happens is with our brain, if we don't close the loop, if we start something and do not complete the task, like making our bed every morning, if we don't close the loop, that remains open in our brain. It creates that feeling of procrastination. It's like not opening the mail. If you get the mail and you don't open it, after a week, what happens to the mail? You don't have 1 or 2, maybe 3 pieces of mail to open. You've got 20. And then if you wait 3 weeks, you've got 50 pieces of mail. And then you look at that stack of mail and you can't even think about, where do I begin? Because bills are inside of that. And you may be going through a hard time. You may not have the money, but that doesn't mean that those go away. So you ask yourself that question and it lingers with you. It stays with you on your shoulder and it kind of gnaws at you, and you'll get that answer. And then once you start taking action on it, as small as possible, we get a positive feedback loop in our brain. Something as simple as like, how many times do we walk over something in our living room that we look down at and we know we should pick it up, and we know that it'll only take you about 5 seconds to pick it up, but yet we still walk right over top of it and say, I'll get to it later. Those little pieces of cleaning up your house before you criticize the world, that prompts change for the individual at a micro level, and then also a macro level at some point as well. So, I think it starts within the home. It starts with the self. It starts in somebody's own bedroom. Clean up the bedroom before you criticize anybody else out in public, out in the world, before you say one thing about anybody else in the world. Clean up your own bedroom first, And so that question really hit me hard, which, what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I would change, that I could change? And then you lean into what it is you're curious about, and that your life starts unfolding in ways you couldn't even begin to imagine.
Eric, I'm smiling because I was writing the question down and I answered it for myself. My answer is procrastination. And you gave two examples that are exactly that, So, and for me, it's always been a struggle. I I've built so much, and I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate this, but like I have so much confidence in myself to perform under, like, when things get urgent and they have to be done. And so I compress things down, and that naturally, like, I always have this mindset, or I'll get to it later because I'll handle it when it needs to be handled. But that spills over in a negative way to the things like you're talking about. Oh, I'll get to the mail later. It's not because I know I got bills in there. It's just I'll get to it later. I'll handle it. It's, I'll clean the garage up next week, that kind of thing. And those are things like, yes, it's good that I can perform under pressure when the time gets condensed, but it's bad when I apply it to little things in my life and just let them stack up, because then that builds anxiety around, like, oh, I got all this stuff to do now. Like, and I'm trying to keep it all the clutter in my head. So that's an interesting question. I love that. But my answer just happened to fall in line with the two examples you got. So
yeah, on the, and we all deal with this. I mean, on the procrastination front as well, procrastination, interestingly, the CIA targets and specifically seeks out people that are high in anxiety, because that's a fight or flight type response for us that we put ourselves in. And it's not healthy to be in that state for extended amounts of time, but that's a driver for us. When we were talking about high performers and athletes and entertainers and, business owners, entrepreneurs, people that strive, not reach. The procrastination piece can drive us forward when we can actually sit down and do it, Right. Like Dan Coe, who's an influencer who I follow on social media, he describes this quite well. He says, like, let your procrastination. Now I'm talking against myself in a way here. So anybody watching this is going to have to be able to kind of segue inside of this a little bit. But if you can commit to like 4 hours of deep work and you let that procrastination build up to a point that's not dangerous, right? If you're missing a target, a goal, or if you have a deadline or something, of course. But once you do sit down, we get into a deep focus. We get into flow, where the sense of time, the sense of self goes away, and then you look at your watch and you're like, man, it's been 3 hours already. That's that feeling of being in flow. So procrastination can, if it's intentional procrastination and you reach that feeling, that friction, because we need something. It's like, if I just push my hand like this, my knuckles are going to shake. But if I have an opposite against it right here, now I'm steady and I can move. That's friction. That's counterbalancing something against us. And that procrastination can help serve us if we're aware of it. You're aware of it. So, but if we're looking at what I was mentioning earlier is about the taking the action piece. If procrastination and anxiety and your inability to take action, yet in your brain you can foresee yourself being this other person, oftentimes it does start with something very, very simple, which is taking the first step, like picking up the sock that you step over in your living room, or when you do the laundry, don't let the clothes sit in the dryer until they get cold, because then you take them out and they're all wrinkled. Right. So it's like, it's little things like that. Those are little actions. If you commit, it's closing the loop. If you start something, finish it, see it through to completion. And, you do the laundry. As soon as those are dry, take them out, because now you can hang them up and fold them, and then put your clothes on and walk around looking like a decent, well-respected human being.
Very good. Very good. So Eric, I could riff on a lot of these topics for several hours, but I do want to kind of close things down and wrap it up. So what we're going to do, like we do with all our guests, I'm going to drop all your information, your website, your social media, all that in the show notes. But some folks don't look at that. So what is the best way to connect with you if anybody's interested in kind of maybe carrying this discussion further with you, or just having, connecting with you, seeing what you're all about, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, say go to my website, ericmarkfischer.com. And my last name is spelled with a C, so it's Fischer. And there you'll find more about my journey, what I'm embarking on from a speaking standpoint. My podcast is launching in January, and we're starting up socials as we speak. So it's an exciting time, to get in touch.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on Burning the Ships, man, and appreciate us. I'm glad we were able to connect, and I look forward to, I know you're kind of just kicking this thing off, and I have no doubt, like I can tell just in this last hour that you've got the grit to make this thing happen and take it where you want to go. So be patient in that outcome, and I'm rooting for you, man. I appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you, Jason. I love what you're doing, man. Keep up all the good work.
All right, my man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Man, what a special human being that is. Eric, like many of our guests, I mean, we just continue to stack them up, and our guests continue bringing the value and bringing the goods. And I'm very fortunate to kind of facilitate it and just steer the conversation. But what a journey he's been on. And what I love most about Eric's story is basically, and we hear this a lot, but I mean, he's a great example of it. Turning pain into purpose, right? Turning pain, leveraging pain and tough times into good times, right? And he's certainly doing that. Like most of my interviews, I am learning in real time as I'm interviewing them more about their story. We connected through social media, and I knew very little about him. And I knew, the basics of his story, kind of as I shared in the intro of this. But to learn it in real time, he's a girl dad, got 2 great daughters. He's really turned his whole philosophy around in life to be a better, more present father for them. And he's leaning into it now to share his story and hopefully inspire people all around the world. So very excited and thrilled and grateful to be kind of on the front end of his new journey and get to share that with you guys. So, again, reach out to Eric. We'll have all his stuff there in the show notes, and connect with him. And hopefully y'all got as much out of that as I did. As always, presented by 608B Capital. We are a real estate debt fund. We have investment opportunities for investors, and we have loan products available for short-term fix and flip investors. So if any of that interests you, please reach out to us. We're always happy to have those conversations. And as always, I will ask all of you, whatever platform you're listening on, just hit that rate button, give us 5 stars if you like it. Leave us a review and copy it and send the link to any of your friends and family so we can get this just shared with more and more people. But that'll conclude another Burning the Ships, and we will see you guys next time.